Good morrow to you, my fellow nerds. My name is Elon Osborne, and I like to talk about movies, audio, and music. And today, now that the season finale has dropped, I just quickly wanted to touch on the Rings of Power, the prequel to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, taking place about 5,000 years before Frodo and Sam take their grueling journey to Mount Doom to destroy the One Ring. This is going to be spoiler-free, so don't worry about that. But the era in which the Rings of Power takes place is the Second Age of Middle-earth. 3 rings for the Elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. That's it. That poem sums up what Amazon is trying to bring forth to its viewers, the stories surrounding the forging of those Rings of Power and the ultimate reign of Sauron himself. Now, I know this subject is extremely polarizing. I would even say to the level of Star Wars when it compares to fanboys and fangirls equally praising and hating the show. I'll admit that I'm not an uber Lord of the Rings fan like Stephen Colbert, who can recite passages verbatim, but I adore the Lord of the Rings trilogy from Peter Jackson. The Hobbit, not so much, but even Peter Jackson himself will agree with me on that. But before I get into what I like about the Rings of Power, I will say this about Amazon. They spent an exorbitant amount of money just to get the rights to make this series, and yet they didn't purchase the rights to the Silmarillion. For those of you unfamiliar, the Silmarillion is an in-depth account of the lore behind Middle-earth and the other surrounding kingdoms, what transpired during the First and Second Age, as well as the events leading up to the Third Age, which takes place during the Lord of the Rings with Frodo and Sam that you're most familiar with. So, with the Silmarillion including events that happened during the Second Age, and the Rings of Power taking place during the Second Age, why on earth would you not secure the rights to the Silmarillion as well? It's just a little confusing. But simultaneously, the Silmarillion is not for everyone. It goes over lineages extensively and reads more like the Bible or a textbook. Not exactly presented in an enthralling, fictitious novel sort of way. So Amazon would have still needed to take many artistic liberties to make it a compelling story on screen. But still, if you're going to buy the rights to something, might as well go all in and buy the rights to everything, even the Silmarillion, right? Alright, now that I got that off my chest, what Amazon has been able to accomplish with this series is nothing less than remarkable. Sure, I know there are critics on YouTube who have blasted its feeble attempts to storytelling or character development, calling it a complete shit show and a total waste of time and money. Whatever. Whenever a massively anticipated show like this comes out, I try my very hardest not to get too into my own head with expectations, because that will ruin anything you end up watching. I just tell myself, okay, show me what you got, and I just ride the wave, baby. But they didn't have this character in the story. This scene should have gone this way. Elves aren't supposed to have dark skin. Oh, you mean the fictitious elves that are made up in Tolkien's head? You mean to tell me that you can suspend your disbelief with this fake land with dwarves, orcs, talking trees, and little people, and yet the color of the elf's skin is where you draw the line? Get the f out of here with that backwards logic. Let me tell you, it is hard to adapt a novel into something that will eventually be seen on screen. Even Peter Jackson and a team of writers had to heavily rewrite The Lord of the Rings to make it work on the big screen. Really important characters unfortunately had to be axed. Some characters were amalgamations of a few characters wrapped up into one. Some scenes had to be portrayed in this way instead of that. Yes, The Rings of Power is a slow burn when it comes to pacing, but just go back and watch the extended versions of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. There are many slow scenes filled with just dialogue or traveling, etc. Why was it okay for Peter Jackson to do it, and yet so many people are hating The Rings of Power for doing the same thing? Here's one thing I hope we can all agree on though. This has to be the most gorgeous series on television right now. Yes, this is the most expensive TV series of all time, and my goodness, it shows. The attention to detail with the set design, the exquisite costumes, The makeup, the weapons, the architecture, the CGI of the dire wolves was incredible. The CGI backgrounds every time there was a scene on a ship or on the open sea. The beginning scenes after Mount Doom had erupted, where everything was cloaked in this rusty reddish haze. Just stunning. Every shot I saw dollar signs, because they didn't hold back on spending every penny in showing it to you on screen.
Really spectacular, spared no expense.
The 4K presentation with Dolby Vision was out of this world. Since it was a slow burn for most of the series, there weren't too many standout Dolby Atmos scenes, but when battles happened or action did pick up, it was immersive as hell. Sure, since we're dealing with compressed Atmos that's streaming over the internet, I had to turn up the overall volume more than I would a 4K Blu-ray disc, for example, but that's just par for the course with streaming content. I'm used to it now. But scenes with dire wolves, arrows whizzing through the air, swords and weapons clashing, the eruption of Mount Doom, that sure shook the hell out of my walls. During the season finale, when the three witches had their confrontation with the scraggly bearded stranger that fell from the sky, their voices were traveling all over the soundstage, along with the wind and the fire, etc. So it sure seemed like there was a hefty chunk of budget given to the audio department, which I was so thankful for.
Hooray.
And I know I'm in the minority for this next subject, but I have to mention the musical score. Howard Shore's score for the Lord of the Rings trilogy was legendary. So many recognizable themes that he wrote that complemented the trilogy so well. So Bear McCreary, the composer for the Rings of Power, had a monumental task ahead of him. Pretty daunting, I'd say. And yet, he nailed it. Some incredible themes that he created, the arrangements were on point, the heavy use of a full choir. It was straight out of Middle-earth. Amazon didn't decide to take a new direction like the Mandalorian score. They wanted to stick with the same tone, the same feel, the same rich timbre of Howard Shore's music. And I just feel like the music was probably the most authentic part about this series. I even really like the dark, sinister whispers of the choir whenever there's a scene where those three witches are pursuing the stranger who fell from the sky. Anywho, that's just me geeking out, so bear with me.
Success.
So, did Amazon spend a ton of money on the series? You betcha. Did I see and hear it all? You betcha. Is it a perfect page-for-page remake of Tolkien's lore? Of course not. Is it a non-stop action-packed thriller that Michael Bay would be proud of? No way. It was never supposed to be that. Subpar character development aside, I feel the overall tone of the series matched Peter Jackson's tone very well. Light-hearted and silly at times, very dark and sinister and violent at other times. Do I think Elrond looks like an elven Neil Patrick Harris? You better believe it. For a while there, did I think the stranger who fell from the sky was Daniel Day-Lewis? Yep. And here's a fun fact. Did you know Amazon paid Adobe quite handsomely so that every time I open Photoshop 2022, I see Galadriel's face pop up on the splash page? Or that I see an artistic recreation of Prince Durin and Lady Disa every time I open Illustrator? I wonder how much Amazon paid for that just to have the Rings of Power worm its way into my brain every time I open up those apps. It's the little things. Anywho, I don't see what all the hate is about with this series. I know there are a lot of you out there who don't agree with me, and that's okay. But after the season finale, I can honestly say I am looking forward to what's coming. I want to know the stories surrounding the forging of the 7 rings for the Dwarf Lords, the 9 rings for men, and the 1 ring forged in Mount Doom. I'm honestly excited for that. But, you know, that's just my opinion. So you can react to it however you wish, because I understand that's your right. But let me leave you with this. It is extremely difficult to make a series like this where the canon and the lore is so beloved by so many. So many directors, producers, cinematographers, lighting crew, actors with crazy schedules, set designers, costume designers, blacksmiths, audio engineers, visual effects artists, composers, all of these cogs needing to turn and power this machine like this is so hard to pull off. I wanted to be a filmmaker when I was in high school. I've written screenplays over the years. I've produced and directed short films either for school projects or personal projects of my own. So I get it. It is not easy. So I think this was a solid series. I want more. It feels like Lord of the Rings. And that's what I needed.
And there you have it.
Thank you for listening to me on this soapbox. I know my remarks might ruffle some feathers, but these are just my thoughts. I felt like I had to say something, so I did. Ta-da! Anywho, let's please have a respectful conversation about this, shall we? What are your thoughts? I really want to hear them, positive or negative, concerning this series. I'm genuinely interested. So as always, please be kind to each other out there. Don't just watch the Rings of Power, experience it. And of course, always be listening.